Okay, the session is now being recorded. If you do want a recording, by the way, Warren, please go ahead and send me an email about that, and I'll make sure you get it. But for tonight, on behalf of TW School of Library and Information Studies, I'd love to welcome you to Proving Your Library's Value. I'm Carol Perryman, big surprise there, and this webinar is sponsored by a grant obtained on behalf of students in my course, Health Sciences Information Services Management. It was funded by an experiential faculty fellowship. But the topic of assessment is just too global, too important right now, not to share with the entire school and even the TWU community. But a bit of housekeeping first. Our speaker, Ms. Sheila Hatchell, will be pausing briefly several times throughout her presentation for questions. There's actually a slide saying questions. And there will be some time allowed at the end, depending, for more discussion. And the way we've got this set up, you can ask questions in the chat box by typing them in. When there's time, I'll facilitate the Q&A by reading those questions to her, trying to keep them in order. We may not be able to cover everyone's questions, but we'll try our best. And if your question isn't addressed during any of the pauses during the presentation, please try to ask them at the end where there may be some more time. So this whole session, as I said, is being recorded, and I'll make a link to the session available to the classes I'm teaching and on request to others. If you would like a link, please ask. I can probably also send something out through the listserv. If, as sometimes happens, you get booted, maybe your cat goes across the keyboard or whatever, just go ahead and try to re-enter the session. If it doesn't work, know again that the session is being recorded, and we'll make that available after the fact. If you have problems, what you can do is to click on Sarah Merrill's name. Sarah's our assessment officer, as I said. She's facilitating here as well. But click on her name, and you should see a little pop-up. Select private message from the pop-up options to communicate directly with her. She'll try to work with you. So take a look at the tools that you have along the top of the main window. To check your audio, you click on that link, control your volume. In order to run a test, I think you have to leave the session. There's also a help button on the top right that goes to the Adobe Connect help kind of FAQs. So above the window where our speaker will be sharing her slides, you should see a bar called Share or Sharing. And to enlarge her slide, because there are some that have a fair amount of text on them because they're tables from her work, you can click on the little square thing with 4 arrows pointing to the corners, and that should enlarge to full screen. Another option that you can use is Zoom to be able to read that text. You can go back to the regular view by just hovering your mouse in the same area, and those icons will show back up. Sheila Hatchell was an invited speaker for the Special Libraries Division of the Texas Library Association last April at their annual meeting. The Special Libraries session was entitled Creating a Comprehensive Library Valuation Picture, Tools of the Trade. Actually, we met in the shuttle coming in from the airport where we got into a conversation, and I happened to mention my growing interest in evaluation. And Sheila mentioned her own work. We kept talking. And when the Medical Library Management course was awarded this grant to support experiential learning, Sheila's great work came to mind. I really want to urge you to check out, if you haven't already done so, the links that I sent out with the announcement, particularly the toolkit. She'll be talking about these things this evening. I've actually never seen anything like it. So while she works for the Minnesota Department of Transportation, the work that she and others have done is actually a truly fine example for other libraries to follow. So I'm very pleased to welcome Sheila Hatchell, our invited speaker for this evening. She's the Library Director of the Minnesota Department of Transportation and our speaker this evening. Hi, Sheila. Thanks for being here. I'm turning it over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me all right, Carol?
Perfectly well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that introduction, and I'd like to say good evening to everyone in Texas. I'm speaking to you from St. Paul, Minnesota. in my office, and everyone's gone home for the evening, so it's nice and quiet here. So hopefully we won't have any interruptions. I supervise a staff of 4 librarians, 1 library technician, and 1 library intern. And we serve a staff of just over 5,000 employees, many of whom are civil engineers. And we also serve staff who work in planning, environmental resources, GIS or Geographic Information Systems, construction and contracting, land management, and more common offices such as communications, human resources, and government relations. And MnDOT, our library is a special library because we're focused on the topic areas of transportation and civil engineering. We're also a government library and a state government library to be exact. So every 4 years there's a possibility of a new governor and that will get a new department head for us. So we have to be flexible and adaptable and respond to change as it comes along. So thank you again everyone for being here tonight, and I'm really excited to tell you about library evaluation, at least from our perspective, and share our results with you. And I developed an interest in library evaluation when I became library director 7 years ago. I knew the day would come when someone would come knocking on my door asking me about the return on investment the library provides for the dollars that the department invests in us. And I wanted to be ready for that discussion. So I was attending the Special Libraries Association conference in 2011, and I became aware that 2 transportation librarians, colleagues of mine, were also interested in this topic. So we decided to begin a study that summer. And we did a search for articles and books and studies to see what was already done. And we found something pretty astonishing in that research, which was that almost all of the literature was related to public and academic libraries. And what did exist for special libraries was for corporate and law libraries, and they often charge back for their services, so that wasn't going to work for us either. And many public libraries and some academic libraries have calculators available on their websites. We came across those in our research. But again, they were developed for those specific types of libraries and don't work for special libraries and the kind of work that we do in particular. So this calculator I'm showing you on the screen is from the Maine State Library. And logically, it includes what they want to measure. I realize the text is small, so I put in a few call-out boxes just to give you an idea. So they're looking at books borrowed, magazines, movies, CDs borrowed, museum passes borrowed, and children's and adult programming. And so for the kind of work we do in our special library, this was just not going to work for us. And it's also a very one-dimensional approach. So as I synthesize the findings of the research, my 2 colleagues and I that we did back in 2011, several themes appeared over and over. And the first one was that return on investment, or ROI, really means it reports dollars saved. And we also learned that ROI is important, but so are the many other services that libraries provide. And there's a growing interest in not using ROI, but instead library valuation to create a broader and more inclusive picture of the library's value. Another recurring theme was that it is crucial, very, very crucial, to align your library's work with the work of your parent organization. And finally, as nice as it would be to have one product that all libraries could use, due to the different types of libraries, the varied work that they do, and their particular customers, there simply is no one size fits all. So the results of our study were published in the report, Proving Your Library's Value, a Toolkit for Transportation Librarians, and the cover's displayed on your screen there. And the toolkit is freely available, and I know Carol made this available to you in the webinar announcement. And I'll remind you later on in my presentation about how to find it on the web. It's very easy to pull it up. Many transportation libraries exist within government, and they often come under the threat of reduction or closure when financial times are tough. And if you're new to libraries, or if you've been around for a while, you maybe know that we're very easy targets when money becomes tough. And for that reason, we wanted to brand the study to our transportation libraries But in fact, the techniques in the toolkit can be implemented by all types of libraries. So we just picked that title because we wanted to raise our profile among our particular agencies. So I'm going to talk to you about the toolkit first, and then show you how we implemented the toolkit where I work at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. We use MnDOT for short, so you'll be hearing that throughout my presentation. There's 5 main sections to the toolkit. The introduction, conclusion, and appendices are important. But in the interest of time, I'm going to jump right to the heart of the study and talk about planning and preparation, building your case, which is gathering all of your information together, and then we're going to talk about communicating the findings of your evaluation study. Alignment refers to tailoring a library's activities to promote and support specific institutional goals. In this era of tight budgets and competing priorities for funding, aligning your library to your parent organization is key. You will need to gather documents that relay this information, and they might be called things such as a mission statement, value statement, strategic objectives, or whatever else you might find them that they're called at where you work. So read those over carefully, and then think about the work that you do, and think about where the work of your library fits within the strategic directions and goals of your parent organization. And even if you're only thinking about conducting a library evaluation study, it's a good idea to develop what I like to refer to as a evaluation mindset, and intentionally think about the work you do, whom you do the work for, and where this work aligns with your agency's goals. Think about what you already have available and what additionally you'll need to gather. Page 12 of the toolkit is displayed here. And again, I've added a few call-out boxes in case the text is too small for you to read. So we're looking at things like collecting success stories and testimonials. And then we talk about the time and effort it's going to take to do a study like this. And also we talk about the importance of storytelling. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. This is page 12, so you can see it more clearly if you look at the toolkit up close and instead of on your screen. But the list here, it will aid you in planning and hopefully to help you get your arms around starting the idea and executing a evaluation study. And if you think finding the time to work on an evaluation study will be an issue, consider putting time on your calendar for this specific purpose and then stick to it. Use that time to work on library evaluation. And talk with your supervisor and upper managers and have a conversation about what they are interested in hearing about the library and how best to present it. So now I'm going to move on to building your case and talking about valuation types. So once you are well into your planning phase, you're ready to start compiling the information necessary to do your study. Most librarians are familiar with statistics, metrics, and surveys, and also ROI calculators. And while you're familiar with those, there are other services and forms of assistance that have gone unnoticed for years. And it's now time to identify and include them as part of your library evaluation story. In working on the toolkit, it became apparent that there are 6 types of library evaluation, and they're listed here: anecdotes and success stories, community and social impact, also known as SROI, metrics and statistics, surveys, contingent valuation, and calculators. And I'm going to address each of these valuation types in more detail. So starting with anecdotes and success stories, stories are very popular right now because your audience can relate to stories. For your particular organization, a story can relay how you saved a staff member time, gave them information to make sound decisions, and even saved them money. You most likely also provided them with materials that they would not otherwise have been able to find on their own. The challenge is in identifying those customers who can help you tell stories that demonstrate the value or even added value the library provides to individual staff and by association to the whole organization. The toolkit highlights 5 value stories, and they're all true, from our transportation librarians. And one of my favorite stories tells the story of how the library saved their organization $1 million by instead they spent $130,000 managing and purchasing licensed technical standards. And they calculated if all those standards that were used had been purchased individually, it would have been over $1 million. So the toolkit provides lots of thinking points to help you identify some of the work you do, and that might be good to help you make your valuation story. SROI stands for Social Return on Investment. And this is not something new that libraries are doing, but instead bringing a new appreciation and value recognition to services that libraries have been providing all along. Social return on investment can refer to things like providing workspace for those outside of your building to use when they visit your building for meetings and arrive early, or maybe they're in between meetings. Or it can refer to hosting events, having speakers, doing presentations, hosting brown bag lunches, and even reading clubs. Or even something as simple as a place for interviewees to complete paperwork and relax while they're waiting for a job interview. Some of our MnDOT staff come to the library for a quiet place to work when their offices are having a noisy day. Everybody's talking and there's lots of energy. And this person in particular needs to focus on an important deadline and get their work done. So they'll come down to the library and have a nice quiet place where they can focus. And this slide shows a busy open house event held at our library last year. It was a social opportunity to bring people together, have some fun, and for them to learn something new. And our research also revealed something called organizational aura. And this is another often unacknowledged benefit. And it relates to what makes work a nice place to be, and that having a library is a major attraction when recruiting new employees and retaining current staff. So next is metrics and statistics, and chances are your library might already be collecting some statistics. Most libraries do that. And there are likely statistics available through your library's website, circulation system, and e-journals as well. Statistics are commonly thought of as a collection of quantitative data that report what happened. You might think of them as hash marks recorded as work is completed, or numbers that are automatically generated by a system that you use. When the numbers are used for comparison, they get turned into a metric that can show trends or help tell a story. And this chart on your screen is a visual of MnDOT Library's interlibrary loans for 2013. And it compares materials supplied versus materials borrowed. And at the end of the year, it's apparent that we borrowed more materials than we loaned. And that's a really good argument for supporting interlibrary loan, to show that we actually get more than we give in that part of our program. Metrics and statistics should not be relied upon exclusively, but they certainly have a place in helping you build your case. This is particularly true when they are used to support and enhance your valuation stories. And for those of us who work with numbers people, such as scientists and engineers, including metrics and statistics might be something they actually expect to see. Metrics can be used as a benchmark for comparing your library with similar types of libraries who are defining, collecting, and reporting their statistics the same way you do. As the toolkit was being developed, a non-scientific survey was conducted in order to gather unique information from actual transportation library customers. 12 libraries participated in the survey. As an example, one of the questions in our survey asked users, when they use the transportation library for their work, does the library save them time and even money? And as a result of conducting this survey and gathering the responses, we were able to confidently report that 73% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that using the library did save them time, and 69% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that using the library saved them money. Surveys allow you to gather quantitative metrics and also qualitative stories and user comments through open-ended questions. This is the kind of information that will help you present a more balanced valuation picture of your library. Contingent valuation makes you turn things around and look at them from another perspective. The basic question is, what would happen if the library didn't exist? If you have staff using your space for events such as training or brown bag meetings, ask them, where would you hold your training sessions and brown bag lunches if the library didn't exist? If you manage electronic collections and journals and abide by copyright and licensing agreements, who would manage this for your organization if the library didn't exist? Or if you provide standards to engineers working on construction projects, where would they get these important standards if the library ceased to exist? You can ask individual customers for whom you have located and purchased or borrowed unique materials. How would you have obtained those materials without the help of the library? The possibilities go on, and the toolkit provides some other examples to help stimulate your thinking. A final way that libraries can determine value involves the use of predefined ROI calculators, as I mentioned earlier on. They're typically built to take numerical statistics and produce a defined output or benefits as compared to cost or expenses, but there's no one-size-fits-all. Calculators are better than nothing, but they can produce great-looking figures that may be hard to qualify. The story in this slide is from the toolkit, and you can read it later if you want. I'll just summarize it here. And it came as quite an eye-opener to the authors of the toolkit. And it tells how a librarian used the National Network of Libraries of Medicine ROI calculator. The resultant ROI figure was beyond significant, with a finding of nearly 240% return on investment. While this was viewed favorably by the librarian supervisor, their upper manager indicated that the 240% ROI figure could actually be used as an argument to cut the library's budget in half, since the library could continue to be of significantly more value than its operating costs, even if at 120%. The upper manager, in looking out for the library's interests, demanded that it be removed. In addition to supplying possibly exorbitant ROI figures, calculators are one-dimensional and devoid of any sort of story component. They're subject to the same problems encountered by using a statistics-only approach. So Carol, at this time I thought we could pause and see if there's any questions.
Hey, I've unmuted my mic, and so if people have questions, I'll read those to Sheila. Do folks have questions? Go ahead and type them in. I think the idea of an organizational aura is really an interesting one. Skylat asks, how important do you think illustrative and eye-catching graphics are to an assessment outcomes presentation or document?
That is a great question, and I'm going to talk about that later on a little bit more. But I personally researched that myself, and upper management, I think in almost any organization, they're so busy, they're dealing with lots of complex problems, and they just don't have a lot of time. So I've read over and over that to focus on graphics, use mostly graphics with some text, and make it as short and concise as possible will be the most successful way to deal with this.
Their own documents, by the way, serve as excellent examples of the use of graphics. We have a question from Sierra who asks, or actually explains, I work in a map and GIS library. Our work is not as visible as a traditional circulation desk. We've been told it looks like we do nothing because we don't have long lines of patrons at our circ and reference desk, even though we have provided statistics on our services, patron interactions, passed along success stories, and received national recognition, which is fabulous. The perception that we are unused is plaguing us. What further measures would you recommend we take to prove our value as a library to our administration?
To tell you the truth, we have that exact same problem in our library. We have a desk at the front of our library when people come in, and it's always staffed, and there's somebody sitting there with a computer in front of them. And even we're part of a larger office, and even our own office mates have thought that we're not busy. So we've been working on communicating the fact that a lot of our requests for information come in over the internet, over our web form, over the phone. It's not necessarily the foot traffic that that tells how busy we really are, because we are really a very busy library. One thing we did do was we started doing a tally clicker stats week. So every month, and we actually bought one of those little clickers, you hold it in your hand, and for that whole week, whoever's working at the desk, and we have a sheet that we tabulate this on, we actually count how many people physically come to the library and are coming to the library to use it, not just passing through, going to another office. And that's helped somewhat, but I think that is a challenge for sure.
It might really serve you well to look at the documentation that Sheila and colleagues have provided because it's so similar. Cynthia asks whether an annual report is similar to an evaluation.
I think an annual report would be a subset of a evaluation. So you'll see later on our evaluation study is 8 pages long. And we tried to keep it down to that. We had a lot more information that we could have used. But I think, again, annual reports, it depends on where you work and what your management is like. But if they're really busy, maybe just a one-page fact sheet would be enough. And again, we're going to talk about communication next, but you don't want to use library jargon. You want to use the language they used and that people who don't work in libraries understand.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, this one from Tracy Jolivet, and then we'll have to get back to the presentation. So please save your question and re-ask it later, maybe at the end of the session, depending on what's going on. Tracy states, these approaches do require time and effort. Is there a suggestion as to what best to attempt to help provide data to save a public library losing funding from the surrounding communities?
Would you read that one more time, please, Carol?
The core of it is what is best in attempting to help provide data to save a public library from losing funding.
In helping to provide data?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, Tracy, your question may be about the type of data that you might zero in on in an effort to save time and effort. Is that correct?
I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I would like to maybe revisit that question after I show you what we did at our library, because I think that will answer the question.
Excellent. So let's have you go back to your presentation now so we can move along. There will be other opportunities for questions.
Yeah, it's great to have the questions coming, so I really appreciate that. All right, so we've covered 2 parts. We've covered the planning and preparation and then building your case. So once you have your materials, the next logical step is how are you going to communicate your findings? And this is the who, what, when, where, and how of delivering your study report. As you prepare to communicate your findings, there are several things to reflect on. You'll want to craft a larger narrative story that aligns with your agency's values, is tailored to fit the audience, and synthesizes metrics, anecdotes, and other information into a coherent set of points. You'll need to consider your audience as you determine the delivery format and also when, where, and how to present your findings. You need to speak coherently and discuss issues that matter. Focus on topical, relevant issues that relate to the big picture and connect the dots so your audience isn't left to do that for themselves. The stories and narratives should be grounded in reality. Work with your supervisor to determine what upper managers really want to hear. Think carefully about the words you choose to use. The toolkit includes examples of what not to use, such as our common library language displayed on this slide. And it also offers suggestions of currently valid terms to use. The alignment project, initiated by the Special Libraries Association in 2007, included a study of how keywords shape managerial perspectives. It was a very important study. And a link to the alignment project study is included in the toolkit references if you want to take a look at it. So you need to stay away from library jargon and instead use words that your audience is familiar with and take advantage of words currently in use in the business world as well as within your organization. And pick a delivery mechanism that complements your narrative and suits your professional environment. Share stories of your library adding value and incorporate facts or figures when necessary. So some delivery options could include maybe just having a conversation. Or you can create a visual such as a metrics dashboard. Or you might want to do an audio presentation in the form of a podcast. You could do a formal or an informal presentation where you get up and present in front of people. You could write a summary report, create a video, or even write a white paper. And again, it depends on where you work and sort of the culture of your institution and how do they do things, how do they like to hear information. And also consider anything else that would work in your situation, because what I've mentioned are just some suggestions. So there might be something even better that would work in your particular situation. And I had the good luck to attend the SLA annual conference in 2013. And I took a class called Information is Beautiful. It was an all-day special class before the conference. And this was an exceptionally timely class and dealt with how to convey information in a way that is meaningful and that will entice upper managers to read it. This was an exceptionally timely class for me since earlier that year I had begun working on a valuation study for MnDOT Library. And in the second half of my presentation, I'll show you that final product of our study, and then you can see, as I mentioned earlier, how we emphasize graphics over text. This slide shows two different ways to present library circulation. I think most people would agree that the image conveys more to you about the library circulation than the text above the image does. When reading the text, I feel like I have to do the math. So the library materials circulated was 14,000 and something, and the total materials was 23,000. And I'd have to sit and figure out now what percentage is that really. But when you take a look at the graph, it becomes very easy to see the relationship between those two numbers. So the final step in communicating your findings is to pull all of this information together into your valuation report. The combination of the planning and preparation, making your case, and then doing the communication piece. And integrating content can be accomplished in different ways. Rather than focusing on specifics, address the larger interrelated issues and add supplemental evidence to support the findings. You should emphasize the benefits that your library provides, link stories to current events in your agency or your community, and give specific examples. And as you conduct interviews with your library users, take pictures and keep notes, because these can add a personal dimension to your communication piece when you're finally putting it together. So what are the next steps? If you have a library mission and vision statement, review them and see if they align with your organization's mission and vision. They should use some of the same language, and if they don't, you may need to update them so they do. Review your organization's strategic documents. Think about rewriting your position description so that on paper, the work that you do aligns and supports your institution's work. And if you supervise staff, rewrite their position descriptions in the same manner so that all of the work and positions in the library are aligned with your parent organization's mission, strategic directions, and values, and clearly supports the work of your institution. And the same can be said for performance reviews. If you're given the opportunity to contribute to the writing of your performance review, or if you complete a self-assessment process, in your writing, align your work, tasks, and accomplishments with the language in your parent organization's strategic documents. If you're a supervisor, align your performance reviews in the same manner. I completed my performance reviews earlier this year and approached them with alignment in mind. I emphasized the work that supports MnDOT's strategic initiatives and directions, and I tried to incorporate management's language as much as possible. So the next part I'm going to go into is to tell you about our valuation study that we conducted at MnDOT Library. And I thought this would be another good place to pause just to see if there's any questions about the communication piece.
Okay, I've unmuted my microphone. And if you have any questions about what Sheila just described, go ahead and type them in. I really love myself the idea of sort of illustrating the story, adding to the story of your organization. And I can tell you that their report was a very beautifully done example of that. Let's see. So let me go back to Debbie's question here, who says the toolkit document discusses the importance of aligning. And I was wondering if some organizations still don't see the library as aligned, even after the library has bothered to try to be aligned.
How do you do that if they don't believe you? Is that what you're asking?
I think so. Debbie, is that right? So if your efforts maybe to advocate and to demonstrate value are still not listened to, is that what your concern is? Sorry. Oh, yes. Okay, as I thought, concerned with still not being valued even after having done all of this work, and then what? Basically, I think. Any comments about that, Sheila? Next steps, I guess. Perhaps we can come back to that question. Skyla Bryant asks whether assessment and evaluation one and the same, or should those involved in assessment activities treat those terms differently? I hope that, Sheila, I hope you haven't lost your audio. I cannot hear you. Hang on. Sheila lost her audio. Hang on a second. Please hang on, folks. Okay, Sheila's going to go out and come back in. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and look through the questions because I see my magic words, medical libraries. How would communication strategies be benefited in medical libraries? Depends on your setting, I would say, and of course, if you're in an academic library, that would apply as with any other type of academic library, where you've got connections with um, your higher ups in admin and faculty and so forth. Those would be your community. In a hospital setting, you also have a very often rigid structure for the administration, all the way up from your supervisor all the way up to the top of the chain. And in some cases within a very large conglomerate kind of entity, making it a challenge. But I would argue, Debbie, that using the terminology that is recognized to be of value, as Sheila pointed out, and combining the idea of stories with good hardline data can be very convincing in that type of environment, because that is what they use. So you want to talk the talk that they talk. You want to make your story part of the overall organizational story so that they know what they're getting. Cynthia, and I know that Sheila may have more to say about this, but Assessment is actually a growing thing. It's been around, of course, but I think if you look at the literature, you will see an increase in the amount of literature being put out about assessment. And school labors, I don't know. I don't know. Perhaps Dr. M can handle that. Still waiting on Sheila to come back in. You're welcome. I think that really is true, though. I saw it be quite effective. And remember that for hospitals, the big bottom line is not only money, but it's patient approval. And so there's these ratings that get posted even in the elevators, for example. And the things that the Joint Commission look at is patient satisfaction. The Press Ganey reports all bow low to those Press Ganey reports. So as much as you can do with the storytelling of yourself as part of that organization, you have just joined that greater effort. And it makes them look good too. You're welcome. Oh, and Dr. M has provided us with a link that you may want to copy and open a second browser to take a look at. And let me see if I need to. Second here. We need to promote Sheila to. There she is. Promote her to presenter again. Hopefully, cross your fingers, everybody, that she's got a voice. Welcome back.
Hello?
Hi, Sheila. Welcome back.
Oh, I don't know what happened. I just
Oh,
got
well,
booted out or something.
I handled some of the questions, but perhaps the others, if you could just hold on, because I don't want us to run late, and we'll let Sheila get set up. We had some good questions. Fortunately for me, one of them was about medical libraries that I was able to field, and we've got Dr. Morellian here, who is involved with school libraries and teaches in that area. Sarah Merrill, our assessment officer, has also answered a question, so appreciate that. I love that we're all here to kind of discuss this. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for keeping the show going. I appreciate that.
Hey, I'm going to mute my mic and go ahead.
All right. So once the toolkit was published in January 2013, I wanted to implement it at our MnDOT library. And this slide shows a section of a board that is about 4 feet square. And across the top, we listed all of MnDOT's strategic directions and flagship initiatives. And underneath the headings, we place graphical images of the work we have done that supports the individual strategic direction or flagship initiative. And because of limited space to fit this all on the screen, I've included only 2 of MnDOT's 5 strategic initiatives. So one of them is safety. And so, for example, under safety, we included research we did on stop signs, rumble strips, roundabouts, and cable median barriers. And another strategic direction is mobility. And under that, we included research done on smart lanes, congestion, light rail transit, and bicycling. And we displayed this board in our library, and our library staff, as they thought about questions they had completed, we found on the internet pictures to represent that work, and we put them on the board. And this was really a great morale booster for the staff. I could just sense their pride as they added their pictures. And it's much bigger than this. This is just an example of what it looked like. But this was the beginning of us gathering our information. As I said, we had the strategic initiatives, those headings across the top, and then we just started putting our work that we've done that relates to those underneath in a graphical way in the pictures. So now I'm going to show you our study findings and talk about the process we went through. And one of the first steps we did in creating MnDOT Libraries Valuation Study was to hire a consultant because there was no way I could have done this work by myself. And each member of our library staff compiles a monthly statistical report that includes statistics plus a narrative that highlights the stories that go with the work. Our consultant and I combed through all of these reports and highlighted the salient points. In the meantime, we also conducted a department-wide survey. And I'm going to stop here for just a second and talk about surveys because I learned a lot in that process. I think all of us have received lots of surveys over email or other ways and requests to take surveys. And anywhere from those that have only one question to those that have more formal and lengthy surveys. And I think from doing that, we all have a good feeling for what is a good survey and what is a poor survey. And I've come to realize and appreciate that good surveys do not happen by accident. It is an art and a skill to create a good and effective survey tool that will produce the data you need and the results you want. If you're going to conduct a survey, and I recommend that you do, try to find someone in your institution that is skilled in creating good surveys. And by the way, how to create a good survey would be a great addition to a graduate course or a presentation at a library conference. And in our study, we had wasted a lot of time in creating our survey. We just couldn't get it to work right. And it finally dawned on me that maybe we had someone in our department who, in our market research area, that might know how to create surveys. So I contacted her, and she was exactly what we needed to get the survey compiled and distributed. I learned things like making all of the scales go the same direction, so from high to low or low to high, but not mixed up. And you can combine questions into a matrix when possible, and that way you can cut down on the overall number of questions. And then when reporting results, to round the percentages. Don't use like 7 point something, just round it up or round it down and report them as whole figures. And also to put the demographic and unpopular questions at the end. Because when demographic questions appear at the beginning, they can be a turnoff for many people, and they'll simply close out the survey and won't even complete it. So this is pages 2 and 3. Our final report was 8 pages long, and this is pages 2 and 3. And I realize maybe you can't see it on your screen as clearly, so I'm going to explain it to you, and then hopefully you can go and take a look at the document. It's also freely available, and I'll tell you about that later. So there's an introduction. This is inside the front cover. There's an introduction that I wrote, and it talks about our study and how we did our study, what it was based on. And it gives right up front, our return on investment ended up being 1.9%, 1.9. So that means that for every dollar invested in MnDOT Library, $1.90 in benefits and services is returned to our customers and by extension to our organization. And it also talks about that the numbers that we used are intentionally conservative, almost too conservative, but they're definitely very conservative. And below the introduction is a word cloud, and we just generated that. We asked some open-ended questions in our survey, and then we took some of the words from our customers and fed them into a word cloud and just came up with that graphic. It's really in there for interest and something nice to look at. So on the right-hand page is our valuation grid. And what we learned as we went through this study was that we have two kinds of valuation, tangible and intangible. So the grid, I'm going to go over that. I have a larger picture of it here for you. Hopefully you can see that a little more clearly. But if not, I'll explain it here, and then hopefully you can go and look at the document yourself and it will make more sense. And so this is our ROI grid. This is where we actually talk about the money piece. And there were 4 areas of activity where we could calculate our return on investment. And the first 2 types of activity are the blue boxes on top, and they are for time saved in dollars. And the first one is about reference questions that we answer. And we have reference questions that take a long time. They can take anywhere from several hours to several weeks, and then we have quick reference. And we actually track that in our statistics, which are the quick ones and which take more time. And then we also do literature searches for our customers. That's a very common part of our service. And so the librarians tried to figure out how much time would it take a customer to do what they do. And I realize that's a very hard thing to calculate, but we just had to make an estimate. And so we figured for the amount of time they spent, how much time did they spend on the customer requests. And then we multiplied it out by the average salary of our customers. And we actually did that. We had to work with our HR department, and we got the salary figures. And we found out we also had to use the benefits, because part of our study was, in our research, we found out that there was a a study going on for academic libraries called the Live Value Project. And they had the wisdom and insight to actually hire an economist to help them with their study. And we found out who he is. He's Dr. Bruce Kingma from Syracuse University. And so my consultant actually had phone conversations with him. And one of the questions we had for him, because our upper manager said, no, we don't use the benefits, just use the salary. But actually, Dr. Kingma said, no, you have to use the benefits and the salary combined. So anyway, we went through and we got the numbers from our HR department and we figured out who our major customers were, and we averaged that out and it came out to $50 an hour. So that's how we got that multiplier to get the total reference savings. And then for document delivery, that's the second row of blue boxes, and that actually talks about document delivery, which are requests filled from in-house. And this would be loans from our MnDOT library collection, books, periodicals, or whatever, and then also articles that were downloaded and copied from the web. And, and we multiplied those out. We figured, again, I think this is pretty conservative, it would take a customer an hour to find what we found. And then we multiplied it out by that salary figure, again, using the $50 figure, and multiplied that out, and it came out with the total document delivery savings. And then the next two groups of boxes, the sort of orangish ones, those are dollars saved, and they're based on actual library statistics. So the first activity is interlibrary loans. And when we looked at our interlibrary loans, we looked at journal articles that we borrowed and also book titles that we borrowed. And we had to figure out how to put a cost to that. And so there's a service at the University of Minnesota where they actually do this. People go to them and they get them articles. And we talked to the person who runs that service, and he told us that they charge $55 per article. So that's how we got that multiplier, 138 articles through interlibrary loan that we obtained times $55 per article. And then the book titles, we actually went through the books that we purchased in 2012, and we averaged out the cost of our books, and then we added the processing fee onto that because that's part of the cost of providing the book. And so that got multiplied out, and those two figures together combined to be our total interlibrary loan savings. And then the last activity on there is journal routing. And that's something that I believe is pretty specific to our library. I'm not sure how many other libraries do this. But again, we're an engineering library, we're a technical library. So we get lots of journals and magazine type things that come in and newsletters, and we route those to employees. So for each title, I think we get about 300 current titles, and so for each title we have a list of which employees would like to see that. So when the journal comes in, we send it out to the first person on the list, and they have a few days to use it, and then it comes back to us. And then we send it out to the next person on the list, and they use it for a little bit, and then it comes back to us. And so we go through that whole process until everyone on the list has seen the journal. And what our goal is to get current information to people as soon as it's received by the library. So it turns out that MnDOT has its own economist, and we talked to him. He helped us with this study also. And we talked to him about this, and he said that he gets journals routed to him, and he said he thought that for the amount of journals he gets, he thinks there's 3 articles of value per year. And we kind of took issue with that because we know we send up, again, a lot of technical and engineering type information. But because he is respected as MnDOT's economist, we decided to go with the figure that he recommended because we have him to stand behind that figure and say that's what he thinks should be the value figure. So we came up with 3 articles per year, and then going back to the journal articles, if they had to be purchased at $55 a piece, so that multiplier came out to $165. And then we multiplied that out to get total journal routing savings. And so in the end, we added up all of the cost savings and we divided it by our budget, and that's how we came out with our return on investment figure of 1.9. And what I also need to tell you about this, I'm sorry I couldn't fit this all on one slide, so I'm going back to the smaller one here. In the lower right-hand corner are intangible savings. And you know, you learn as you do things. So I have a little bit of regret that the intangible savings ended up being this very small area, because I'll tell you about what we're thinking with intangible savings. And this is things that we cannot assign a value to. So we provide, as you can probably guess from what I've told you so far, we provide an awful lot of reading material to our customers. And a lot of it is reading material they probably wouldn't be able to obtain on their own. And this material is used for people working on MnDOT's projects and initiatives and in research that they're conducting, and it's also used for their decision making. So our challenge is, what is the value of that information provided to our customers? We know it's significant because we get lots and lots of positive feedback about how they couldn't find things, it's just what they needed, and we know it's very significant, but we can't assign a dollar value to it. And that would bump up our return on investment number a lot. And we've also heard from some of our customers that their projects are on hold. So they'll call the library and they'll say, we're working on such and we can't go any further until we get this information. And so our library staff go to work, they work, try to contact our partners or other libraries to try and get the information. So that's very significant. What is the value of providing information to a project that's on hold until they get the information they need? It's a very significant figure, but I don't know how to calculate that. And then what is the value to our MnDOT organization of having a library staff of transportation information specialists? We're experts in our field and we're considered trusted agents. Our customers come to us, we've gotten this kind of feedback too, where they trust us to give them the right information, the most current information, and whatever it is they're looking for. And there's other things on here in this list. I'm not going to go into all of that in the interest of time. But again, if you pull down the report and take a look, you'll be able to see it. So this is pages 4 and 5. This is in the middle of our document, and I'll explain this to you because maybe you can't read the circles. But again, this is part of the graphics appeal of our document. And so the circles that you're looking at in the middle of this page, each circle represents a reference question. And they're questions that were answered by our library staff. And in the back, behind the text, is an image, and that image is related to the question that was being asked. And it's just in there to add graphical interest. And as we comb through all of the statistical information that the library staff gave us, we picked a variety of questions that span all of MnDOT's work, and we wanted to highlight the fact that in addition to engineering questions, we answer legal questions and we compile complex data. And we intentionally use questions that support all of MnDOT's strategic initiatives. So our goal was when upper managers would look at this report, they'd find something in there that they could relate to within the area that they're responsible for. And then on the left-hand side of this page are comments from our customers. And some of these came from the survey we conducted where we had an open-ended question in the survey. And then some of the comments came from the narrative reports that the library staff turned in to me. On the upper right-hand corner are suggestions for improvement that came from our survey. That was one of the questions that we asked is where could the library improve? And we wanted to have a little balance because our evaluation study, this report, ended up being very positive. So we thought we had to balance it with something that showed that we're not perfect and we do have areas where we need to improve. And then in the lower right-hand corner are our list of our partners and collaborators and the networks that we use. And my manager and her manager, several people helped us with this report as we were pulling it together. And we had a couple of recommendations to not include our partners, but we felt that they're so important to our work that they just needed to be included because a lot of the information we get, without our interlibrary loan partners and other libraries, we wouldn't be able to provide the information that our customers need. And this is pages 6 and 7. We're almost to the end now. And towards the end of the report, we decided to include these results from our survey. And they're graphical representations that show to questions such as, what are our customers' reasons for using the library? And how did the information provided by the library help them in their work? And we asked them to identify what information resources they need and use in their work. We asked them about what library services they use, and then we also asked about their use of our library's website. And finally, this is the last page, and it gives answers to a few more survey questions. So this talks about the helpfulness of the staff. Did the service provided by the library meet their expectations? And would they recommend MnDOT Library to their colleagues and coworkers? And then last but not least, the circles on the bottom are the demographic questions. And our department has offices spread throughout the metropolitan area, Minneapolis and St. Paul, and also throughout the state. And so we have staff that do the same type of work, but they're located in different geographical areas. So we wanted to know what topical area did they work, and we wanted to know where's the physical location of their office, and also how long have they worked at MnDOT. And just as an aside, we originally had the ROI grid on this last page, and we did that so it would be easy to use and people could see it as soon as they picked up the document. But our upper managers recommended against that because they said that the upper management who would be reading this are so busy they might only pick it up and read the first 3 pages and then set it down. So we moved the ROI graph to the 3rd page of our report. And we had so much excellent data that we had gathered, and we were trying to limit the report to a concise few pages. So the way we decided to deal with that was to create a valuation website to complement our printed report. And it's a place to put and to gather additional information. This is our web page, and it's available to everyone. It's just a page that hangs off of our MnDOT Library website. And it might be of interest to you because it includes a printable version of our report. This is where you can go to find the report I just showed you. And it gives the definitions for our ROI measures, and it explains how we arrived at the numbers and calculations. And that's going back to the grid that I showed you a few slides ago. It also includes an acknowledgments page because we wanted to give credit to everyone who helped us in this process. And then there's also a document that has a larger sample of reference questions that we've answered. Again, we only had room for a certain amount. We had room for 16, and we had a lot more examples of questions, so we wanted to get those out there. And then we also have a copy of our survey because we thought that might be handy for people to see what our questions were and how were they constructed within the survey. And then one of the things that I really love, and this took a while to think about doing this, but it's called What MnDOT Employees Read. And we do our interlibrary loans through 2 different services, and we were able to pull a report of all the titles that we borrowed in 2012. And I typed all of those up and we sort of categorized them. But some of them are very technical. They're from very obscure conference proceedings or journals. Some of them are from overseas. And it's just very interesting to see what our employees are reading for their work, to be at the top of their field and to do their best work. And it's just great because all of this is made available through our library. And then the final piece in our evaluation web page is our bibliography. So my consultant and I, as we worked through this process, we had to do additional readings just to broaden our knowledge and to help answer some questions for us. So Carol, I think we can pause here and see if there's any questions about the MnDOT study itself.
Okay, thanks, Sheila. And this is fabulous, isn't it? I've been seeing some great comments on the side here as people discuss things. Do we have any questions about this study? And boy, wait till you look at the actual thing. I'm telling you, it is a thing of beauty.
Thank you.
Yeah. I love the consistent use of color schemes throughout, graphics with plenty of white space, and I was kind of pointing out some of the... oh, Debbie has a question. She asks, how long did it take to complete the study? Keep in mind,
it took about 10 months. But I think part of that was because we didn't know, there was nothing to follow. That's what's really unique about our study is we looked, through the toolkit. I was one of the authors of the toolkit, and we looked for special libraries, we looked for other types of libraries, and there was really nothing that was a vehicle to tell what we wanted to tell. And I think that's part of our problem, and maybe if somebody used our study as an example, it'd be easier for them, and that's great. It would be easier for them because they have something to follow because we didn't have anything to follow.
Well, I agree. And Nicole asks what positives and negatives came from that valuation report.
I would say nothing negative came from it. People have been very impressed by it. We showed it to our upper management, and we got comments that they learned a lot more about what the library did, and They think it's a good investment for the department. I think they have, when you read the questions, I mean, I'm trying to keep moving here because, so one of the questions we answered was, which plant toxins of poison ivy and Grecian foxglove are carried through smoke of prescribed burns?
Oh.
And can we use ground penetrating radar to measure variations in overlay thickness? Or you guys, I'm sure you have roundabouts in Texas. I need information on elevated bicycle roundabouts. So again, they're very technical questions. That's why I was saying before, some of them are very quick. They take less than 15 minutes, but some of them take weeks, weeks to complete.
You know, and I'd like to throw in here too, Sheila, because you were talking about sort of the transparency of your report when you talk about suggestions for improvement that people made and your conservative approach to calculating the value of what you do, your valuation. That I remember you saying that an important part of your feedback was that you added credibility to your work because you were conservative. And that's kind of why I called that out.
And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Carol, because actually around the time our study was finished, MnDOT had completed, within one of our areas, they had completed a valuation study. And that return on investment, it was for their capital program, and it came up at $2 to 1, $2 return on investment for every dollar invested, and they thought that was great. So when we came up with 1.9, they thought that was really great. And I've seen studies, you know, where people have come up, like the example I told you before about these hundreds, you know, these really exorbitant figures, like 820 to 1, or I've even seen 1,000,000 to 1, and it's just like, nobody's going to sink their teeth into that. You know,
Well,
they're
or
not
as you
going
pointed
to.
out, as you pointed out, though, it's also an excuse for admin to go, well, you're giving way too much value. We could cut your budget, no problem, right? The last
Yes,
thing you want to hear.
yes, it's dangerous.
You want to go back to your presentation now? I sense that
Yes.
you're, okay, great. Let's do that. And folks, hang on to your questions until the end. I think this may be the last one. And I'll just unmute my mic and it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Carol. So again, both the toolkit, the Transportation Librarians Value Toolkit, it's freely available. I think you guys are librarians, so you'll be able to find it really easily. You can just do a web search on proving your library's value. And as far as the MnDOT library study, if you just put in MnDOT library ROI, that should come up. And just remember that we have the web page plus the study report itself. And you can contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you and help you find anything that you need. So I'm wrapping up here. I just want to share with you our lessons learned. One thing we learned was that creation of a good survey tool is a must, but it's a skill too, and you just have to be careful that if you do a survey that you do a good one. And we learned that we can measure tangible value, but we cannot currently measure intangible value. We also learned that contingent valuation is used everywhere and it's cited throughout the literature, but our upper managers here recommended against using it because they didn't want any element of what if the library didn't exist or what if the library closed down. They just didn't even want those words to come out. So they said, we don't want you to use that. So I listened to them and we took it out. And then halfway through our study, we were appointed a new commissioner or agency head. That's the head of our department. And MnDOT's mission, vision, and core values changed. Now they're really similar, but they did change. But the moral of that story is you need to be flexible. You need to be focused, but you also have to have some flexibility because things change. And then another thing we learned when we worked on our valuation, the return on investment grid, was to avoid double counting. And my consultant and I, we went over, I can't tell you how many times we went over those figures. Because another thing we heard and we learned was that you don't want to enter any element of doubt. So if there's a mistake, then it's like, I wonder what else isn't right in this chart. So you just want to be very careful. That's why I wanted to use numbers I can stand behind. If anybody says, where did you get these figures? I can tell them. So avoid double counting and make sure you use figures that I like to say that you can stand behind. You can show where they came from. Another interesting thing that we learned, as I mentioned about our intangible value, is the value of reading. And there was a study done by Griffiths and King back in the early 1990s, I think it was. And to my knowledge, that is the only study that's ever been done about the value of reading. And so again, my consultant, she was talking to Dr. Kingma, the economist from Syracuse, who consulted on the Live Value Project, and she asked him about that. And he said that that study was so old and things have changed so much, he said I wouldn't even use it. So, so instead, he said that what you really have to do is to conduct personal interviews of library users, or if you're at an academic library, of your faculty also. It takes a lot of time, and people aren't always cooperative in doing that, but that is the only way to get to that value. And then finally, if you can use consultants, if you can find dollars or grant dollars or something to hire a consultant to help you with the study, and then also a graphic artist, I highly recommend that. I do have to say that we hired a graphic artist. He had done work for us in the past. We did a branding, we did a branding of our library back in 2010, and he did our brochure and bookmark and that type of thing. And so we hired him back to pull our study together into a report. And I have to tell you, we gave him this most incredible pile of stuff, and he turned it into this beautiful graphic document. We were so pleased with it. And then finally, MnDOT Library's next steps. We want to find and implement a statistical tracking system that will capture metrics we want, but we don't currently have. And we want it to generate reports, and we hope it will alleviate the library staff from having to do this manually every month. They complain about it all the time. They do it, but they don't like doing it. And actually, we have a study going on right now. We're looking at different systems to see if there's one that will work for us and that we can afford. And then we need to continue studying how to quantify intangible value. We know it's huge and we know it needs to be reported, but it's a challenge. But I guess that's all I can say about it, because we haven't figured it out yet. And then what is the value of networks to which we belong? How well would we function without them? And what would happen to interlibrary loan and access to experts if we didn't have our colleagues in our networks? And then finally, to share valuation studies, don't be afraid to put it up on the web so that other people we can learn from each other, we can see what other people have done, and hopefully in the end it will make this a less painful and less time-consuming process for all of us. And then this is my last slide, and I'm just going to step away for a minute from library evaluation and talk about something else that's been dear to my heart in the past year. And displayed here is some of the reading I've done over the past year. And just as we encourage our library users to stay up to date in their fields, we librarians need to do the same for ourselves. So one of the books is Lean In. It had been published for over a year before I picked it up. And I think the logic and the tips in this book can be as helpful to men librarians as it is to women librarians. Sheryl Sandberg is the author. You've probably heard of this book. And she makes observations such as sit at the table. And so what she means is if you're going to a meeting and there's a table in the meeting in the middle of the room with chairs, and then there's a periphery of chairs around, sit at the table. Don't sit in the periphery. And she also talks about keeping your hand up. So if you're at a presentation and the person is presenting and they say, I have time for one more question. And she answers that question. And then when she's done, what she's learned is that men keep their hands up and women put their hands down because they're very obedient. So she says, keep your hand up and get your questions answered. And she also says a lack of confidence can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. A lack of confidence can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you don't feel confident, fake it. And fake it till you feel it. And she also says opportunities are rarely offered. They're seized. So I'm just pointing this out. There's a lot of great factoids. I took several pages of notes from this book, and I wished I'd read it years ago. Of course, it wasn't published years ago, but it really opened my eyes to a lot of things I wasn't aware about. And then moving on to introversion, many librarians and also engineers, which comprise many of our customers, are introverts. And I've often described myself as an introvert's introvert, which I thought was kind of funny. And one day I began to understand that all of my introvert characteristics weren't necessarily working to my advantage. So I made it a personal goal last year to learn about what it means to be an introvert, and I read the two books on the screen, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, and also The Introvert Advantage. And some takeaways from these books include, if you can't remember names or faces, there's nothing wrong with you. It's a trait of being an introvert. And I have a real problem with names. As hard as I try, I can't remember people's names very well. And then also introverts cannot think quickly on their feet because they need time to process. They're deep thinkers and they need to process what the question is and how they want to respond to it. And that happens to me a lot too. People ask me something and it's like, I just can't answer it. I just can't do that. And then also, as I mentioned, introverts are deep thinkers. They like to work on long, complex problems, and they have great attention to detail. And so that's a real strength. It's a real strength because extroverts can't do that. They like to float from one thing to the next, and they kind of get bored if they have to work on a long, complex problem for a long time. And sometimes I've also learned, like sometimes I'll go to a conference and I'll sit down with nobody I know, and nobody's talking at the table. And I've come to realize that what that is, it's a table of introverts. And if one person just speaks up and asks a question or starts talking to somebody else, it breaks the ice, and all of a sudden you find out that you're sitting around some really interesting people. So don't be afraid to talk to strangers either. And then the confidence gap, it's an article that I just became familiar with a couple of weeks ago, and it was published in the May 2014 issue of The Atlantic magazine. And it was written by two women who also wrote a book on a related topic. And they talk about success correlates just as closely with confidence as it does with competence. So again, it's that word being confident. And they also say men initiate salary negotiations 4 times as often as women do, and that when women do negotiate, they ask for 30% less money than men do. It's interesting to know that. And then also, when women apply for a promotion, they only do so when they meet 100% of the listed qualifications. But when men apply for a promotion, they only meet 60%. So it's a very different way of looking at the applying for jobs. And then finally, in the lower right-hand corner, there's a book called Speaking Up, and then the other one is a DVD, and it's called Speaking to the Big Dogs. And as I was doing our MnDOT library evaluation study, I became aware of these two, this book and this DVD. And they're resources that can help you prepare to present to your upper management. And they tell you things about, it kind of confirms what I had mentioned previously about upper managers are very busy people and they have many difficult problems to solve. And they can multitask. So if you're at a meeting with them and you're talking to them and they're working on their iPads or their phones, they're still listening to you because they have that ability to multitask. And also, if you're given 20 minutes of their time to present, you should plan to present for 10 minutes and then leave the remaining 20 minutes for dialogue and conversation. It's really about dialogue and conversation. And I'm sharing this with you to encourage you to acknowledge your strengths and to work to improve your weaknesses. We all have weaknesses, and as women working in a traditionally female occupation, we need all of the tools available at our disposal to help us succeed and to help us achieve our highest goals in our career as well as in our lives. And that is the end of my presentation, Carol.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I mean, not only did you inform us, as somebody said, you have been positively illuminating. I know I've got lots of new ideas. So let's go to Q&A. I think I saw a couple questions back up here before the appreciative comments you got when you described some of your readings. Obviously, that's really pertinent to us all. Let's see. I'm going back to Christine Swenty's question earlier, who asked, do you think your construction format for your online report could be used to create a public library evaluation report outline?
Well, to tell you the truth, I have worked in a public library, but not in many years and not recently. But I think it gives enough. Yes, I think it could be. I think you could just pull out the stuff related to my library and put in stuff related to your library. It could maybe be considered a template. And I'm sure that public libraries affect people's lives every day. And some of those stories could be called out. We have to protect our customers' identity, so we were very cognizant of that fact. But I think it's worth trying.
Seems like it would be directly applicable in many cases, and that toolkit certainly so if anybody has had a chance to look at it. Barbara asks whether there were other state states, Department of Transportation, I suppose libraries, that you accessed in order to help create your own report?
There were not. I was told to have some back pocket information. I haven't actually presented this myself to upper management. I was hoping to do that, but the opportunity hasn't come up yet. But I did contact other libraries to see what their budgets were, how many staff they have, just getting some kind of figures like that, because I've presented to our upper management on several occasions, and you just never know what they're going to ask you. As much as you think about it and as much as you prepare, they're probably going to ask you something that you don't know. And the answer to that question is, you know, I'll get that for you. I don't have it with me right now, but I can get it and I'll get right back to you on that.
Spoken absolutely like a librarian, huh? Nicole asked a great question. What graduate courses would make for a successful, qualified assessment librarian?
I think it definitely helps to know about statistics. And I took that class and I grumbled through it, but I think it's really good to know about numbers, because numbers can be used in different ways. And so I think that would be helpful. And I think the whole thing about graphical presentation is getting a lot more. I'm seeing more and more webinars about that and presentations at conferences. So I think that whole graphical component is also very important. And I want to mention that if you go to the bibliography on our valuation website, there's a lot of resources there that we use. I can't remember the names of the books right now, but one of them was from the Wall Street Journal and some other ones. It's very interesting when you get into it about how to present information. There's different kinds of charts and graphs, and I actually find that really fascinating in its own right.
Well, it sure makes a big impact. See, Christine also asked, how often do you conduct evaluation?
Well, this valuation, it was based on information from 2012, and we worked on it throughout 2013. And it just came off the press this past January of 2014. So it's not even a year old yet. I've never done this in the past, and I'd welcome the challenge to do it in the future because we got so much excellent feedback. One thing I wanted to mention, if you print out the document and look at it, there's a quote in there from one of our customers, and it says something to the effect that they think MnDOT Library is one of the hidden gems at MnDOT. And that sounds like a really good compliment, but it's like we need to change that. We do not want to be
Yeah,
a hidden gem. We want to be out there. We want everybody
yeah,
to know. And so we encourage our customers, you know, tell your workmates, tell people you work with on projects or whatever about the library, and encourage them to contact us.
absolutely. Jewel in the crown rather than hidden gem.
Exactly, exactly.
Marissa Jones asks, she says, so basically libraries collect information and or self-evaluate, convert information into statistics of various forms, then present those stats in appropriate language. Can this process be manipulated to fit a large range of libraries by refining collections and delivery? And that, you know, this, I think what you've been talking about, would you consider that sort of a proven tactic?
Um, could you read that one more time, Carol?
Okay, Marissa basically summarized the process that you went through in collecting statistics from different components of library operation, and she asks if that would be considered a proven tactic. I think for yourself, you certainly have proven based on the feedback that you got.
You know, I think there is something to that. Again, I like the story component, the stories that go with the numbers.
Yeah,
But, you know, people are putting money into our libraries and they're going to want to know, what are we getting for this money? So I think that, you know, what your purchasing is and what your circulation is, I think all of that is important, but I think it's a piece of the bigger picture. Does that answer the question?
I'm not sure because I'm not actually looking at the new chat. I'm looking at the old stuff. Hopefully, Marissa, you'll type something in if you feel that it did not. Uh, Let's see here. Question about whether in the future a basic course on stats should be required for all librarians.
I guess if I could have my way, I would I'd like to see an overall course on assessment of which statistics is a part.
Absolutely. I'd like to throw in here, and Sheila, I shared that article that our own assessment person from the TW Libraries had shared with me. And it is actually a very new study out about what employers are looking for in terms of the skills of librarians to do assessment. And I also want to throw in that while it may be possible for some larger libraries to hire an assessment person, it's actually also likely that regular staff librarians have to know how to talk about and to contribute to a valuation report for your library. So it's not just important to be able to do all the heavy lifting, but you have to be able to contribute and understand what that's about more and more.
Very well put. As far as looking for graphical images, in addition to the books that are in our bibliography, you can do searching on Google Images too and find lots of different ideas there.
I agree with that because I've done that looking myself. You have been asked if you are going to do another webinar and if you are working on any new publications.
I have to say, after taking a year to work on this study, I was really behind when I got back to my job, my regular job. It did take a lot of time. I have ideas in my head, but I haven't moved in that direction. I probably need a swift kick in the behind to get me going.
I told you so. I told you so. I think you have a lot of value to share. And if, I mean, the valuation study is a big part of that, but also the other things that you had to say. I've seen a lot of feedback here in chat about, basically you're speaking our language here. You're talking about things that we all recognize and find to be of value.
Well, thank you. And, the last part, I hope people didn't mind me talking about the introversion and the lean in and all of that, but I just feel that's all really important. It's really, I had no idea until I read Lean In and the Confidence Gap article that these kind of things are us. I just really had no idea that this was even going on.
I think we've had ongoing discussion in journals and other gatherings about, sort of the undervalued librarian, and there's the joke of the librarian's appearance and all that. So we talk around it a lot. These things are directly approaching how you can deal with the challenges in your world, by sort of growing your confidence and how important that is. So it's not just saying, God, they really don't think much of us. We're just kind of shy. I can't speak up. But how do you go about doing that? I think that valuation, working on this kind of stuff, is going to increase your self-confidence. It will increase the profile of the library within its community and make it really the jewel in the crown.
Yeah, the confidence is an important piece, and I think that goes to the part where when people apply for jobs and men meet they do meet 60% of the qualifications, and women only apply when they know 100%. And it's like, we know we're good people, we know we're good workers, good thinkers, and we just don't have that confidence like males probably do to put ourselves out there and apply for the job.
Absolutely. So we've got about, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sheila.
I was just going to say we're all growing, and you go into a job and you don't know everything, and it's an opportunity for growth. Take your skills and take them to the next level.
I think so, and I think that we haven't had the same kind of journey to take in the past as librarians. These things have always been important in order to keep your library viable and funded, but they're getting more and more important. And I think everybody here and more besides would attest to that after what we've seen during, say, economic downturns, right? Really, it's important to make your story, make it tangible, make it part of the overall story in order to find value. Okay, so we've got 1 minute left, and with that minute, and I know that I did not get to all questions, but I would like to offer my thanks and share everybody else's thanks and their real appreciation for the topic covered, and furthermore, your own personal advice. Really
And
appreciate you joining us.
I want to thank everyone for hanging in there when I lost my audio connection. I apologize. I don't even know how it happened. I think I just got dropped or something, but thank you for hanging in there.
Truly flexible.
It's the name of the game.
That's right. So be looking for the link that I'll provide to folks, and I may just send something out through Cassandra, our own SLIS listserv, just for your information, Sheila. And I'm going to go ahead and close the session. Again,
And
our
I
thanks.
hope our paths cross in the future. It would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Lots of thanks in the sidelines here in chat. You should see it. And maybe if you go look back at it, you will. All right. Well, everybody, good night.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.